unaware that the most dangerous mafia boss in the Midwest had been watching her from the shadows for 6 long years. He made his mistress pour an entire bowl of ice water over his 7 months pregnant wife's head at their 5th anniversary party, while 800 guests laughed and recorded her humiliation on their phones. Serena Blackwood stood there, shaking in her soaked red gown, her trembling hands wrapped around her swollen belly as her husband Brandon Cole announced to the crowd that she was nothing but an orphan nobody wanted and a stepping stone he was finally discarding. His mistress, Veronica Lane, smirked as she ground her heel into Serena's hand when the pregnant woman fell to her knees on the cold marble floor. Not a single person in that ballroom moved to help her, and not a single voice rose in her defense as she knelt there, drowning in shame while the man she had given 6 years of her life to kissed another woman above her broken body. But what none of them knew was that 12 black SUVs had just surrounded the Grand Venetian Hotel. And what happened when Lucian Moretti walked through those ballroom doors with 20 of his men left Brandon Cole begging on his knees for a mercy that would never come. The man who had humiliated a pregnant woman in front of 800 people was about to learn that Serena had never been an orphan nobody wanted because she had been the protected princess of the Moretti Empire since she was 9 years old, and the boss who ruled Chicago's underworld had loved her in silence for 18 years, waiting for the moment she would need him again. Sometimes the predator you should fear most is not the one who roars, but the one who watches quietly from the darkness until you touch what belongs to him. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories every week, because sometimes the most dangerous love is the one that waits in silence and strikes without warning. The ballroom doors burst open with a thunderous crash that made all 800 guests turn at once, and the orchestra faltered in mid-phrase, as if the very air in the room had frozen solid. Lucian Moretti stepped across the threshold with a slow, commanding stride. His steel, cold gray eyes swept the room before stopping on the image of the woman kneeling on the icy marble floor, with her hair soaked through and her red dress clinging to her pregnant body. Behind him stood Marcus Chen and 20 men in black suits lined up like a silent and lethal army. The guests nearest the entrance immediately retreated to either side, forming a passage as if their survival instincts were screaming that this man must not be obstructed. Someone recognized him, and whispers spread through the ballroom like a cold wind, carrying pure fear. Moretti. That is Lucian Moretti, the head of the Moretti family, the man who ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron hand and made those who dared oppose him vanish without a trace. Brandon Cole was still standing on the stage with his arm around Veronica's waist and a triumphant smile on his lips because he had not yet realized the danger moving toward him. Lucian did not look at him yet, because the mafia boss's gaze was fixed on only one person. He walked toward Serena with steady steps, and each footfall echoed on the marble like a countdown to judgment. When he stopped in front of her, Serena lifted her head, and her tear-filled brown eyes met the icy gray eyes of the man she had fled from 6 years before. Lucian said nothing. He only slowly removed his suit jacket with movements strangely gentle for a man famed for cruelty, and draped it over Serena's trembling shoulders. The jacket still held the warmth of his body, and the faint scent of sandalwood mixed with tobacco that Serena remembered from the days she had lived in the Moretti mansion, when she was an orphaned child under its protection. Lucian lowered himself onto one knee to be level with her, and his rough, scarred hand gently lifted her chin. Serena trembled not from the cold, but because she could not believe he was here. That after everything she had done, after the letter she had left, after 6 years of silence, he had still come when she needed him. "Lucian," she whispered in a voice hoarse with tears and exhaustion. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Shh, Piccola." Lucian's voice was low and gentle, meant only for her. "We'll talk later. Right now you need to stand." He helped her up with a strong, steady arm, and Serena clung to him as if he were her only lifeline in a storm-tossed sea. Marcus Chen immediately stepped to their side like a living shield, while the other men spread out to encircle the ballroom and block every exit. Brandon finally sensed that something was wrong when he saw his wife in the arms of a strange man, and the entire room looking at that man with a fear they had never shown him. "Hey!" he shouted from the stage with a voice full of anger and a tremor he tried to hide. "This is my private party. Who are you to come in here and touch my wife?" Lucian slowly turned to face Brandon, and the smile that touched his lips was so cold that several people in the room shivered. "Your wife," Lucian said calmly as if discussing the weather while a storm waited behind his eyes. "You just poured ice water over her head in front of 800 people and called her a stepping stone. You let your mistress stomp on her hand while she is 7 months pregnant. And now you call her your wife." Lucian tilted his head as if studying a particularly repulsive insect. "Allow me to introduce myself, Mr. Cole. I am Lucian Moretti, and the woman you just humiliated before the whole world is the woman I have protected since she was 9 years old." Brandon's face drained from angry red to deathly white in a matter of seconds as the name Moretti finally pierced through his arrogance and struck the part of his mind responsible for survival. Moretti. The name rang in Brandon's head like a death knell, and his legs suddenly felt weak as if someone had pulled the bones out of his body. Who in Chicago didn't know the Moretti family, the shadow empire that had ruled this city for 5 decades, with stories of enemies who vanished without a trace, and business rivals who went bankrupt overnight? Brandon had heard the rumors about Lucian Moretti, about the man who inherited his father's throne 6 years ago and made the Moretti Empire more powerful than ever, about his merciless cruelty toward anyone who dared betray or insult the Moretti family. But Brandon had never imagined that those stories had anything to do with him, with Serena, with the wife he had always considered a nameless orphan girl, with no one in the world. He had been wrong in a deadly way. Veronica stood beside Brandon. Her red lips suddenly drained of color, and she stepped back one pace and then another, as if physical distance could save her from the fury radiating from the man in the black suit standing at the center of the ballroom. She remembered what she had just done, remembered the moment she laughed as she poured ice water over Serena's head, remembered the way she pressed her heel onto the pregnant woman's hand, and now she realized that the woman she thought no one protected was in fact protected by the most dangerous devil in the entire city of Chicago. "Brandon," Veronica whispered with a trembling voice while her nails dug into his arm. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was connected to the Morettis." Lucian heard her and turned his ice-cold gaze toward Veronica, making her shudder as if she had been plunged into ice water. The same ice water she herself had poured over Serena only minutes before. "You didn't know," Lucian repeated in a voice so calm it was terrifying. "So what if you had known? If you had known Serena was mine, you wouldn't have stepped on her hand. You wouldn't have poured water over her head. You would have treated her like a human being." He paused and tilted his head, studying Veronica with the eyes of a predator examining its prey. "But because you thought she had no one protecting her, you did all of those things. What does that say about the kind of person you are, Miss Lane?" Veronica opened her mouth, but no sound came out, and she began to cry, black tears of mascara running down her cheeks as her whole body shook. 800 guests in the ballroom stood like stone statues, no one daring to move, no one daring to breathe too loudly because they knew that any attention drawn to themselves in this moment could be a death sentence. Those who had laughed when Serena was humiliated now prayed that Lucian Moretti wouldn't remember their faces. Those who had filmed on their phones now secretly deleted the videos with trembling hands. Those who had stood still and not helped now wished they had been braver, not because they cared about Serena, but because they feared for themselves. The air in the ballroom grew so thick it felt like it could be cut with a knife, and the scent of fear spread like a poisonous perfume. Brandon swallowed and tried to regain his composure even as his legs shook like leaves. "Mr. Moretti," he said in a voice he hoped sounded confident, but was in truth as fragile as glass, "I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Serena never told me about you, or about the Moretti family. She said she was an orphan with no relatives." Lucian turned back to Brandon, and the smile on his lips was so cold it could freeze hell itself. "So you're admitting that you treated her badly because you thought she had no one protecting her. You're admitting that you exploited her loneliness, her weakness, her trust." Brandon realized he had just dug his own grave and hurriedly shook his head. "No, I didn't mean that. I love Serena. Everything that happened tonight was just a joke that went too far." "Right, Veronica." He turned to his mistress with pleading eyes, but Veronica had already stepped away from him as if he were a source of contagion she needed to avoid at all costs. "A joke," Lucian repeated, and his laughter echoed through the silent ballroom, making many people shiver. "You call pouring ice water over the head of a woman 7 months pregnant a joke. You call announcing in front of 800 people that she was a stepping stone you were discarding a joke. You call letting your mistress step on your wife's hand a joke." Lucian took one step forward, and Brandon took one step back, while Veronica began to sob uncontrollably. "Let me tell you what isn't a joke, Mr. Cole," Lucian said in a voice as light as a feather and as sharp as a blade. "The fact that you will pay for what you did tonight isn't a joke. The fact that your life as you know it ended the moment you touched Serena isn't a joke. And the fact that I've waited 6 years for this moment, the moment you exposed your true nature in front of 800 witnesses, that certainly isn't a joke." Marcus Chen stepped up beside Lucian, and for the first time he spoke, his voice low and cold. "Sir, everything is ready. The FBI is waiting outside. And we have all the evidence." Brandon heard the word FBI, and his eyes went wide with terror, while Veronica began to tremble uncontrollably, tears and mascara streaming down her face. Lucian nodded to Marcus, and then turned back to Brandon with the gaze of a king delivering a death sentence to a traitor. "You want to know who I am, don't you, Mr. Cole?" Lucian said as the entire ballroom held its breath. "I'm the man who's going to show you what hell looks like while you're still alive." 18 years earlier, on the coldest winter night Chicago had ever seen, a 9-year-old girl named Serena Blackwood was sitting on her bed reading the fairy tale book her mother had bought for her that afternoon. The small warm house lay in the suburbs of the city, where her father worked as an accountant for a transport company, and her mother taught piano to the neighborhood children. It was an ordinary family, happy in the simplest way, and Serena had never imagined that such a peaceful life could be torn apart in only a few short minutes. The front door was kicked open with a sound like thunder, and Serena heard her mother scream in terror. The little girl jumped off the bed and ran into the hallway, but her father stopped her with eyes full of fear and despair. "You have to hide," he whispered in a trembling voice as heavy footsteps echoed from the stairs. "Go into the closet and don't come out no matter what you hear. Promise me, Serena. Promise me, my child." Serena nodded with tears in her eyes, and her father pushed her into the closet in her grandparents' bedroom, the large oak wardrobe where she often hid when they played hide-and-seek. He closed the closet door, and Serena heard his footsteps running back into the hallway, heard him shout to ask what the intruders wanted, and then the gunshots came. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots. Serena covered her mouth so she wouldn't scream while her whole body shook like a leaf in a storm. She heard her mother crying and begging, heard a man asking about a ledger, about numbers, about transactions her father had recorded. Her mother said she didn't know anything, that her husband never brought work home, and then another gunshot rang out and her mother's crying stopped. Serena wanted to scream, wanted to run out, wanted to hold her parents, but she remembered her promise to her father and bit her lip until it bled to stay silent. The killers searched the house for hours, overturning every drawer, tearing apart every book, smashing through every false wall in search of something they never found. They passed the room where Serena was hiding many times, and each time she thought she was going to die, that they would open the closet and find her. But they didn't, perhaps because the wardrobe was too ordinary, too unremarkable, or perhaps because her father had deliberately placed a chair against the closet door before he ran into the hallway. The killers left near dawn, and Serena stayed inside the closet, not daring to move, not daring to breathe too loudly, not daring to believe the nightmare was over. She sat there all that day, all that night, all the next day and the next night as well. 3 days, 72 hours. A 9-year-old girl sat in the darkness of the closet, listening to the dead silence of the house, smelling the scent of blood growing stronger as it seeped through the crack in the door, and knowing that her parents were lying somewhere outside the closet, cold and still. She didn't cry. She couldn't cry. Her tears had frozen just like her heart, like her soul, like everything inside her. She just sat there clutching the fairy tale book her mother had bought, the book she had unconsciously carried with her into the closet, and she read and reread stories of princesses saved by brave princes while wondering why no one came to save her family. On the 3rd day, when Serena was exhausted from hunger and thirst, when she had begun to drift between waking and dreaming, the closet door suddenly opened, and light flooded in like an explosion. She looked up with empty eyes and saw 2 figures standing before her. A middle-aged man with silver hair and deep dark eyes looked at her with pain and guilt, and beside him stood a young man of 18 with storm-gray eyes and a dangerously handsome face, who looked at her with an emotion she was too young to understand. "Your father saved my life many years ago," the older man said in a low, regret-filled voice. "I came too late to save him, but I won't come too late to save his daughter. From today on, you're a child of the Moretti family." That man was Don Alessandro Moretti, the head of the Moretti Empire, and the young man beside him, the one who stepped forward and gently lifted the fragile 9-year-old girl out of the dark closet, was Lucian Moretti, the man who would spend the next 18 years of his life protecting her at any cost. During the first weeks in the Moretti mansion, Serena didn't say a single word. The 9-year-old girl with empty eyes sat by her bedroom window all day, staring out at the vast garden without truly seeing anything, eating when she was fed, sleeping when exhaustion overtook her, and waking every night from nightmares filled with gunshots and the smell of blood. Don Alessandro hired the best psychologists to help her, but Serena refused to open herself to any of them. She built a wall around her heart, a wall of stone and silence, and no one could break through it. No one except Lucian. The 18-year-old young man didn't try to force her to talk like the others did. He simply stayed there, every day, every night, like a patient and steady shadow. He sat in the hallway outside her room when she woke from nightmares and her screams echoed through the mansion. He brought food to her room when she refused to go down to the large dining hall full of strangers. He read to her through the closed door, fairy tales about princesses and princes, his voice low and even like rain falling on a roof. 1 month after she arrived at the Moretti mansion, Serena opened her bedroom door for the first time and saw Lucian leaning against the wall outside, the fairy tale book in his hand. Apparently having fallen asleep while reading, she looked at him for a long time, at the dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep, at the way he still held the book tightly as if afraid of losing it. And for the first time since that terrible night, Serena cried. Not the silent crying she had kept inside for so long, but a broken, flooding sob, the sob of a child who had lost her parents and finally allowed herself to feel the pain. Lucian woke immediately, and when he saw her standing there with tears streaming down her face, he didn't question her and didn't offer the empty comforts adults often do. He simply opened his arms, and Serena ran into them, clinging to him as if he were her only lifeline in a sea of despair. They sat there all night, the 9-year-old girl crying in the arms of the 18-year-old young man. And when dawn came, the wall around Serena's heart finally began to crack. From then on, Serena's life in the Moretti mansion slowly changed. Don Alessandro treated her like his own daughter, sent her to the best schools, bought her the finest things, but more importantly, he took the time to teach her about life, about how to read people, about how to protect herself in a world full of those willing to exploit the weakness of others. Marcus Chen, who would later become Lucian's right hand, taught her how to shoot when she was 13, even though she hated the sound of gunfire because it brought back memories of the night her parents were killed. But Marcus said she needed to know how to defend herself. That fear was normal, but letting fear control you was foolish. And Serena learned, practiced, and grew stronger every day even though she never truly loved weapons. But of all the people in the Moretti mansion, Lucian remained the closest to Serena. He drove her to school every morning and picked her up every afternoon, no matter how busy his schedule was with learning to inherit his father's empire. He taught her to ride a horse at the family ranch outside Chicago, patiently holding the reins while she trembled on the horse's back for the first time. He sat by her bed every night she had a nightmare, his rough but gentle hands stroking her hair until she fell asleep again. When Serena was 15 and cried because she couldn't save an injured bird she had found in the garden, Lucian sat beside her for 3 hours, saying nothing, simply letting her cry on his shoulder. And when the bird died, he buried it with her beneath the largest oak tree in the garden. "Serena, you love with such kindness," Lucian said to her that day, his voice gentle in a way he reserved only for her. "Don't ever let this world take that away from you." The years passed, and Serena grew into a beautiful young woman, with warm brown eyes and a smile that could melt even the coldest hearts in Chicago's underworld. She became the lady of the Moretti family, respected and protected by everyone in the empire. Yet she never became arrogant or distant. She was still the little girl with the kind heart Lucian had rescued from the dark closet years ago. And Lucian, now a powerful man with a reputation for ruthlessness in the underworld, still looked at her with gentle eyes as if she were the only pure thing in his dark life. But Serena didn't know that this gentleness had slowly transformed into something deeper, something Lucian kept hidden because he knew she saw him as a brother, a protector, not a man, and he would rather keep her beside him in that role than speak the truth and risk losing her forever. That fateful night came on Serena's 21st birthday, when she went downstairs to the kitchen to get a glass of water at 2 a.m. because she couldn't sleep. Don Alessandro had died a year earlier of heart disease, and Lucian had officially become the head of the Moretti Empire with all the power and responsibility that came with it. Serena knew Lucian's work wasn't always clean. She had grown up in this family long enough to understand that the Moretti Empire wasn't built on flowers and rainbows, but she had deliberately refused to look at that darkness, had chosen to see only the gentle brother who always protected her, and not the Mafia boss. The entire city feared. But that night, the darkness came for her even though she didn't seek it. Serena passed by Lucian's study and saw the door slightly open with light spilling into the hallway. She meant to walk past, but a stranger's voice made her stop. "Please, sir, I have a family." The man's voice trembled with desperation. "I'll pay all the money back. I'll do anything you want. Please spare me." Serena held her breath and peeked through the narrow crack. She saw a middle-aged man kneeling on the floor, his face covered in blood and tears, his hands tied behind his back, and standing before him was Lucian, the man she had seen as a brother for 12 years, but whose face was now completely unfamiliar to her. There was no gentleness in those gray eyes, no warmth on that handsome face, only the pure coldness of a killer preparing to finish his prey. "You sold the Moretti family's information to Castellano," Lucian said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "You know what the punishment for betrayal is. But my family," the man sobbed. "My wife, my daughter, they don't know anything. Please don't touch them." Lucian tilted his head at the traitor, and Serena saw a cold smile appear on his lips. "What kind of man do you think I am?" he asked. "I don't kill innocents. Your family won't be harmed. But you. Lucian drew the gun from his jacket with a movement so smooth it felt like a natural extension of him. You made your choice when you decided to betray me. The gunshot rang out, and Serena saw the man collapse with a bullet hole in his forehead. She covered her mouth so she wouldn't scream, but her feet stepped back instinctively and hit the small table in the hallway, knocking over the vase and shattering it. Lucian turned, and his eyes met hers through the crack in the door. For a brief moment, Serena saw something in his eyes. Perhaps pain, perhaps fear, perhaps regret for letting her see the darkest part of him. Serena, he called her name, but she had already turned and run as if her life were in danger even though she knew Lucian would never hurt her. She ran to her room and locked the door, leaning against it and trembling like a leaf in a storm. The image of the man collapsing with a bullet hole in his forehead replayed in her mind, merging with the memory of the night 12 years earlier when she hid in the closet and heard the gunshots that killed her parents. Lucian knocked on her door and called her name all night, but Serena didn't open it, didn't answer, couldn't face him. She had spent 12 years lying to herself that the Moretti family was different from those who killed her parents, that Lucian was different from cold-blooded killers. But that night she saw the truth. He was just like them. He killed without hesitation. And even though she knew the circumstances were different, that the man Lucian killed was a traitor who deserved it, she couldn't live in a world where violence and death were part of everyday life. She didn't want to be someone who stepped over corpses to eat breakfast every day. Serena didn't sleep that night, and when dawn came, she made her decision. She packed a few clothes and essentials into a small suitcase, took some cash she had saved from the allowance Don Alessandro had given her over the years, and wrote a letter she left on the bed. Lucian, she wrote with trembling hands and tears falling onto every word. I can't live in this world anymore. I've tried for 12 years to ignore the darkness around me, but after last night I realized I can't continue like this. Every gunshot I hear takes me back to the night my parents were killed. Every drop of blood I see reminds me of that horrible smell in the house where I hid for 3 days beside my parents' bodies. I know you protected me, loved me, gave me a family when I had no one left in the world, but I can't stay. Please don't look for me. Please let me live a normal life without guns, without blood, without death. I love you as a brother, but I can't love your world. Please forgive me. Serena. She left the Moretti mansion at first light while the house was still asleep, and she didn't look back even though her heart was breaking into pieces with every step away from the home that had been hers for 12 years. 6 months after leaving the Moretti mansion, Serena found a job as a waitress in a small cafe in the suburbs of Chicago, far enough to feel safe but close enough that she could still see the familiar skyline whenever she felt homesick. She rented a tiny studio apartment with a single bed, a small kitchen, and a window facing a dark alley. But it was hers, and she loved it because it represented the freedom she had longed for. Life was hard in ways she had never experienced under the protection of the Moretti family. She had to worry about rent and utilities and what to eat each day, but she didn't complain, because at least she didn't wake up every morning afraid of gunshots and the smell of blood. Brandon Cole walked into the cafe where she worked one autumn afternoon, when yellow leaves covered the sidewalk and the wind chimes on the door rang softly to announce a customer. He was tall with neatly combed brown hair, warm blue eyes, and a smile that could melt any heart, especially the heart of a lonely 21-year-old girl trying to prove she could live a normal life. Brandon ordered a black coffee and sat in the corner all that afternoon, reading a book and occasionally glancing at Serena with what she naively believed was sincere interest. He came back the next day, and the next day, and the next, until his presence became the bright point in her dull workdays. He began talking to her, asking about her life, her dreams, the books she liked to read, and he listened as if every word she spoke were precious. He read poetry to her by the cafe window when it rained, poems about love and hope and happy endings that Serena longed for after a childhood full of tragedy. He told her she was the light in his dark life, that from the moment he saw her he knew she was the one he had been waiting for all his life. Serena believed him with the whole naive heart of a girl who had never been loved romantically, who had never heard such sweet words except for the familial love Lucian and Don Alessandro had given her. After 6 months of dating, Brandon proposed by Lake Michigan at sunset, and Serena cried when she said yes because she believed she had finally found happiness, finally proven that leaving the Moretti family had been the right choice. Their wedding was small and warm with only a few friends Serena had made at the cafe and some of Brandon's colleagues. Serena invited no one from her past because she didn't want the past to find her, didn't want Lucian to know where she was, even though sometimes late at night she wondered if he thought about her, if he was looking for her, if he hated her for leaving. The first year of marriage passed in a hazy happiness, and Serena believed she had found her own heaven. But that heaven began to crack in the second year when Brandon slowly revealed the true face he had hidden while courting her. He began controlling the money, saying she didn't know how to manage finances and he would take care of everything for her. He cut off her contact with the few friends she had, saying they weren't worthy of her, that they only used her, that he was the only one who truly cared about her. He began mocking her every day, words like knives cutting into her self-worth. "You're nothing without me," Brandon told her one night when she asked why she couldn't keep her own salary. "You're just an unwanted orphan. I saved you from that miserable cafe life, and this is how you thank me." Those words pierced Serena's heart, but she was too used to enduring, too used to believing she didn't deserve better. So she stayed silent and accepted it. In the third year, Brandon began coming home late with the scent of another woman's perfume on his clothes and secret messages on his phone he always hid from her. In the fourth year, she discovered Veronica Lane, the beautiful lawyer who worked at Brandon's company, and when she confronted her husband, he didn't bother denying it. He only laughed and said she should be grateful he hadn't left her even though she had nothing to keep him. In the fifth year, Serena found out she was pregnant, and in that moment she hoped. She believed the baby would change everything, would bring Brandon back to the man she had loved in the beginning. But instead Brandon grew colder, more distant, and began openly taking Veronica to social events while Serena stayed home alone, with a growing belly and a breaking heart. She had fled the darkness of the Moretti world only to fall into another kind of darkness. One without guns and blood but filled with cruel words and a loneliness more devastating than any bullet. Back in the present, in the ballroom of the Grand Venetian Hotel where 800 guests were holding their breath and waiting, Lucian signaled to Marcus Chen, and the tall man with an ice-cold face stepped forward to place a laptop on the table and connect it to the large screen behind the stage that had previously been showing photos of Brandon and Serena. "I think everyone here deserves to know the truth about the man they just raised their glasses to celebrate," Lucian said, his voice carrying through the deathly silent room. "Mr. Brandon Cole, the successful businessman, the perfect husband, the soon-to-be father. Let's see who he really is." The screen lit up, and the first image that appeared was a marriage certificate with the name Brandon Cole and a woman named Michelle Torres, registered in Miami, Florida 8 years ago, with no record of a divorce. A murmur rippled through the ballroom like a tidal wave, and Serena felt her legs weaken, saved only by Lucian's steady arm holding her up. Brandon already had a wife. For 5 years she had lived with him. She hadn't been his wife, but only his mistress, the third party in a marriage she never even knew existed. "This is bigamy," Lucian continued in a voice as cold as ice. "Under Illinois law, bigamy carries a sentence of 1 to 3 years in prison. But that's only the beginning." Marcus moved to the next slide, and numbers filled the screen. Financial reports, bank transactions, forged contracts. Over the past 5 years, Mr. Cole defrauded more than 20 investors of a total sum reaching $50 million through his shell company. He used the image of a stable family man to build trust, and used Serena as a tool to construct that image. Brandon stammered on the stage, his face as white as a corpse. "Those are baseless accusations. I'll sue you for defamation. My lawyer will." "Your lawyer?" Lucian cut in with a cold smile and turned to look at Veronica, who was trembling like a leaf in a storm. "Miss Lane, or should I call you Accomplice Lane, would you like to explain your role in this scheme?" Veronica shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face as she tried to move farther away from Brandon as if he were a source of disease. Marcus moved to the next slide, and messages between Brandon and Veronica appeared on the big screen for 800 people to read every word. A message from 3 months earlier when Serena announced her pregnancy. Brandon wrote, "She's pregnant. The plan has to change." Veronica replied, "Wait until after the birth. The life insurance will pay double if she dies in an accident while having a newborn." Brandon wrote again, "I've increased the policy to $5 million. After we take care of her, we'll take the money and disappear. Michelle in Miami will also have to be dealt with." Serena heard those words and felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach, making the baby kick in protest. Take care of her. Brandon hadn't just deceived her, hadn't just betrayed her. He had been planning to kill her and the child she carried to collect the insurance money and run away with his mistress. She had slept beside a murderer for 5 years without knowing it. "This is conspiracy to commit first-degree murder," Lucian said, his voice like thunder in the deadly silent room. "Along with bigamy and large-scale fraud, Mr. Cole is facing at least 25 years in federal prison." Brandon collapsed to his knees on the stage, his legs no longer able to support him, and he began to cry, crying like a child caught doing something wrong, rather than a man remorseful for his crimes. "Please, Mr. Moretti," he whimpered. "I'll do anything you want. Money, the company, everything. Please spare me." Lucian stepped forward and stood before Brandon, looking down at the man kneeling at his feet with the eyes of a king looking at a worm. "You want me to spare you," Lucian said slowly, each word deliberate. "You deceived the woman I protected for 18 years. You exploited her loneliness and her longing to be loved. You called her an unwanted orphan while you're the one unworthy to stand in the same room as her. You plan to kill her and the child she carries, and you want me to spare you." Lucian bent down and took Brandon's chin, forcing him to look into his gray eyes, cold as hell itself. "I'm not God, Mr. Cole. I don't forgive. I take revenge." Serena stood there with Lucian's jacket still draped over her shoulders, looking at the man she had loved, trusted, sacrificed everything to be with, now kneeling and begging like a coward. She remembered the nights she cried alone over his cruel words and wondered what she had done wrong. She remembered the times she forgave his infidelity and believed she wasn't enough to keep him. She remembered how she had run from the Moretti family, from Lucian, from those who truly loved her, only to fall into the arms of the man who planned to kill her. And for the first time since stepping into the ballroom that night, Serena didn't feel sadness or pain. She felt only a cold emptiness and a single question echoing in her mind. How could she have been so blind? The ballroom doors opened again, and this time it was black suits with bright FBI badges on their chests, who entered with the cold professionalism of people who had done this job thousands of times. The lead agent approached the stage with steady steps and an expressionless face, while 2 other agents followed with handcuffs ready. "Brandon Cole," the agent announced in a voice that carried through the silent room. "You're under arrest for bigamy, interstate organized fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you." Brandon tried to stand and run, but his shaking legs betrayed him, and he fell face first onto the stage as 2 agents quickly restrained him and cuffed his hands behind his back. "No," Brandon screamed in a shrill voice like a slaughtered pig. "You can't do this to me. I'm Brandon Cole. I have lawyers. I have power." "You have nothing," the lead agent said coldly as he hauled Brandon to his feet without much gentleness. "Your assets are frozen. Your company has been seized. And your lawyer?" The agent turned to look at Veronica, who was trying to slip toward the exit. "She's about to be arrested too. Veronica Lane." Another agent blocked her path, and his voice rang out like a death sentence. "You're under arrest for aiding and abetting fraud, aiding and abetting conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent." Veronica screamed like a cornered animal and struggled as the cuffs tightened around her wrists. "I didn't do anything. It was Brandon. He forced me. I'm just a victim." "Your messages say otherwise," the agent replied flatly. "The court will be very interested in reading the detailed plans you sent Mr. Cole about how to deal with his wife." Brandon and Veronica were led out of the ballroom as their cries and pleas echoed through the room like a tragic anthem for the downfall of those who thought they could escape justice. Serena watched the back of the man she had called her husband for 5 years, and she didn't feel the satisfaction she thought she would. She felt only tired, exhausted to the bone, and a vast emptiness where her heart used to be. When the ballroom doors closed behind Brandon and Veronica, Lucian turned back to face the 800 guests who still stood like stone statues with pale faces of fear. The room was so silent that the sound of people struggling to breathe could be heard, and Lucian let the silence linger for a few more seconds so they could fully feel the fear tightening around their throats. "Now," Lucian said, and his voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like thunder before a storm. "It's your turn." 800 guests shuddered at once as if a cold wind had swept through the room, and many began edging toward the exits, even though they knew Lucian's men blocked every way out. "I watched this room all evening through the security cameras," Lucian continued, walking slowly through the crowd like a wolf among sheep. "I saw every face that laughed when Serena had water poured over her head. I heard every clap when she was called a stepping stone. I saw every phone raised to record the moment a woman 7 months pregnant was humiliated before a crowd." Lucian stopped in front of a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who was trembling violently. "Mr. Harrison," Lucian said, in a voice light as a feather and sharp as a blade, "your shipping company depends on contracts with the Port of Chicago. Do you know who controls the Port of Chicago?" The man named Harrison swallowed in terror and shook his head, unable to speak. Lucian moved to a woman trying to hide her phone behind her back. "Miss Wellington, your son is applying for a scholarship to Harvard. A recommendation letter from the board I sit on would be very helpful for his application." Lucian continued through the crowd, calling people by name, reminding them of business ties, loans, contracts, recommendations, all the things their existence in Chicago's high society depended on, and all of it led back to one name: Moretti. "I'm not asking you to become good people. Lucian said when he returned to the center of the ballroom. "I know that's too much to ask from people like you, but I'll make sure you remember tonight. I'll make sure that every time you see someone being bullied, humiliated, treated unjustly, you'll remember 800 pale faces in this room and ask yourselves whether that victim has someone standing behind them." He paused, and his ice-cold gray eyes swept over every face. "Now get out of my hotel." 800 guests surged toward the exits like a panicked herd, and in less than 5 minutes the grand ballroom was empty, leaving only Lucian, Marcus, his 20 men, and Serena standing there with his jacket still over her shoulders, looking at the man she had run from 6 years earlier with tears in her eyes and a single question in her heart. How could she ever be worthy of his love after everything she had done? Outside the Grand Venetian Hotel, 12 black SUVs were still lined up like loyal guard beasts, and Marcus Chen led Serena to the Rolls-Royce Phantom parked directly at the main entrance with its engine still humming softly. She slid into the back seat, upholstered in soft leather, and the familiar feeling of luxury brought back memories of the days in the Moretti mansion when she had been wrapped in silk without realizing its value. A middle-aged woman with neatly tied black hair and warm eyes was already waiting inside the car, and she smiled at Serena with the same smile Serena remembered from the time she had caught a cold or scraped her knee as a child. "Dr. Vasquez," Serena whispered, her voice thick with emotion, because she hadn't expected the woman who had cared for her health for 12 years in the Moretti mansion to still be here, still waiting for her after 6 years of leaving without a goodbye. "Welcome home, my dear," Dr. Elena Vasquez said gently, as she opened her medical bag and began checking Serena's blood pressure. "Let me see if you and the baby are all right after tonight." Serena sat still while Dr. Vasquez worked, taking her blood pressure, listening to the baby's heartbeat, examining the hand Veronica had stepped on, and carefully bandaging the bruises that were slowly turning dark purple. "The baby is very healthy," Dr. Vasquez said after finishing the exam. "The heartbeat is steady and strong. She's a little warrior like her mother. As for you, your hand is bruised but not broken. You need rest and to avoid stress in the coming weeks." Serena nodded weakly, and Dr. Vasquez squeezed her hand before leaving the car, leaving Serena alone in the quiet space, scented faintly with leather and sandalwood. She looked out through the tinted window and saw the police cars taking Brandon away, their blue and red lights flashing in the night like unlucky shooting stars. She should have felt relieved, should have felt free, but all she felt was a vast emptiness, as if someone had scooped out everything inside her and left behind a hollow shell. The door opened, and Lucian slid into the seat beside her with the smooth, controlled movements that defined everything he did. He didn't speak, and neither did Serena, and they sat in silence for 5 long minutes, as if both were searching for the right words to break the wall of 6 years between them. Finally, Serena spoke first, her voice hoarse with tears and exhaustion. "You watched me for 6 years." Lucian nodded, his eyes still fixed ahead as if he didn't dare look at her for fear he wouldn't be able to control his emotions. 6 years, 3 months, and 17 days, he said evenly. "I knew every place you lived, every job you took, every person you met. I knew when you met Brandon, when you married him, when you became pregnant. Why didn't you stop me?" Serena asked, and her voice broke at the end. "Why didn't you tell me Brandon was a fraud before I married him? Why did you let me suffer through 5 years of hell?" Lucian finally turned to her, and Serena saw in his gray eyes a pain she had never seen before. A pain hidden for 6 years and now laid bare like an unhealed wound. "Because you asked me not to find you," Lucian said slowly, each word like a blade cutting into his heart. "You wrote in your letter that you wanted a normal life, without guns, without blood, without me. I respected that, even though it killed me every day. But Brandon," Serena said desperately, "you knew he was bad. You could have saved me." "I could have saved you at any time," Lucian admitted with pain. "But you wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought I was trying to control you, trying to pull you back into the world you hated. You would have thought I was making things up about Brandon because I was jealous or because I wanted to possess you. You needed to see his true face yourself. I only hoped—" Lucian's voice faltered and he had to pause to steady himself. "I only hoped that when it happened, you wouldn't be hurt too badly." Serena looked at the man beside her, the man who had saved her from the dark closet 18 years ago, protected her for 12 years, let her go when she wanted to go, and waited for her in the shadows for 6 long years. She realized this wasn't control or obsession as she had feared. This was love, the patient, unconditional kind she had searched for all her life but had been too blind to recognize when it stood right in front of her. "I'm sorry," Serena whispered, and tears finally slid down her cheeks after so many hours of holding them back. "I'm sorry for leaving. I'm sorry for the letter. I'm sorry I didn't trust you." Lucian lifted his hand and gently wiped the tears from her cheek with his thumb. the gesture so tender it made Serena cry even harder. "You don't need to apologize, Piccola," he said in a voice meant only for her. "You're home now. That's all that matters." The Rolls-Royce glided smoothly along the familiar roads. Serena had traveled thousands of times during the 12 years she lived here. And every turn, every row of trees, every street lamp stirred memories she thought she had buried beneath 6 years of distance. When the massive iron gates of the Moretti estate slowly opened, and the car followed the stone path to the main house, Serena felt her heart tighten with a feeling she couldn't name. Perhaps homesickness she had denied for so long, perhaps regret for leaving, perhaps both woven into something too complex for words. The Moretti mansion stood in the night with its lit windows like warm eyes welcoming her home. And Serena realized that no matter how hard she had tried to run from this place, no matter how hard she had tried to build a new life elsewhere, this was truly home. This was where her heart belonged. Marcus Chen opened the car door and Lucian helped Serena out with the care one gives something fragile and precious, his hand steady on her arm as they climbed the familiar steps to the front door. The servants lined the hallway on both sides and bowed with respect, and many of those faces were the same ones who had been here since she was 9 years old, first brought from her parents' blood-stained house. "Miss Serena has returned," an elderly butler with white hair said with a trembling voice. "We've waited for you a very long time." Serena wanted to speak, but her throat closed, and she could only nod with tear-filled eyes. Lucian led her through the wide hallway with its oil paintings and crystal chandeliers she remembered from the days she ran around carefree as a child, past the sitting room where she once read by the fireplace on cold winter nights, past the dining room where she had sat with Don Alessandro and Lucian at warm dinners she only realized she was lucky to have after they were gone. They stopped before the door at the end of the second-floor corridor, and Serena recognized it as her room, the room she had lived in for 12 years before she left on that fateful night. Lucian opened the door and turned on the light, and Serena stood frozen when she saw what was inside. The room was exactly as it had been the day she left, every detail preserved as if time itself had stopped here. The bed with the lavender sheets she loved was still neatly made every day, even though no one had slept in it for 6 years. The bookshelf was still filled with the novels and fairy tales she had read hundreds of times. The desk still held the old lamp and the box of colored pencils she used to draw with as a child. And on the wall, the photographs of her through the years still hung in their places, from the thin 9-year-old girl with empty eyes rescued from the closet to the beautiful 21-year-old with a radiant smile at her university graduation. "You kept everything," Serena whispered as she stepped inside and touched the pillow, feeling its familiar softness beneath her fingers. "For 6 years, I never gave up hope that you'd return," Lucian said behind her, his voice deep and low like a cello in the night. "This room is cleaned every day. The sheets are changed every week. Fresh flowers are placed on the table every morning. I wanted that when you came back, you'd see there was always a place waiting for you, that you never truly lost your home." Serena turned to Lucian and tears ran freely down her cheeks and she didn't wipe them away. She noticed a photo frame on the table beside the bed that she didn't remember from before, and stepped closer to pick it up. It was a picture of her and Lucian taken on her 15th birthday after he had taught her to ride a horse, both of them covered in mud and smiling as if it were the happiest day in the world. She remembered that day, remembered how Lucian had patiently held the reins while she trembled on the horse's back, remembered how he laughed when she fell into the mud and jumped down with her so she wouldn't feel embarrassed, remembered how he told her she was the bravest girl he had ever known. "This photo wasn't here before I left," Serena said, her fingers brushing the glass. "I put it there," Lucian admitted, a rare hint of shyness in his voice she had never heard before. "After you left, I needed something to remind me you were real, that those years weren't a dream. I looked at this photo every night and wondered where you were, whether you were happy, whether you remembered me." Serena set the frame down and did what she had wanted to do since the moment Lucian walked into the ballroom that night. She turned and hugged him, holding him tight as if afraid he would vanish if she let go. And for the first time in 6 years, she felt truly safe. Lucian stood still for a moment as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Then his arms slowly came around her, one hand supporting her back, the other gently stroking her hair the way he used to when she was a child with nightmares. They stood there in silence for a long while, and Serena felt her broken heart begin to heal piece by piece. Not because Lucian had saved her from Brandon, not because he had taken revenge for her, but because he had waited for her, kept this room for her, and never stopped loving her even when she left without looking back. The next morning, Serena woke in the familiar room with sunlight filtering through the curtains, and for a brief moment she forgot everything that had happened. Forgot the terrible night in the ballroom, forgot Brandon and Veronica, forgot 6 years of hell. She thought she was still the carefree 21-year-old waking up in the Moretti mansion waiting for Lucian to knock and call her down for breakfast like always. Then the baby kicked hard inside her, and reality crashed in like a tidal wave, washing away the illusion. Serena sat up and saw a breakfast tray on the table beside the bed with a single white rose in a small vase and a handwritten note in Lucian's familiar handwriting. "Eat breakfast and then come down to the library to see me. There are things I need to talk to you about." Serena ate quickly, even though she had no appetite because she knew Dr. Vasquez would scold her if she skipped a meal while 7 months pregnant. Then she changed into the clothes someone had placed in the wardrobe, brand new outfits sized for her pregnant body, and went down to the library where she knew Lucian was waiting. The library was just as she remembered, with shelves reaching the ceiling, the familiar scent of old paper and leather, and the large fireplace crackling, even though it wasn't very cold outside. Lucian stood by the window holding a thick file, and when he turned to her, Serena saw a rare hesitation in his eyes, as if he were weighing whether he should say what he was about to say. "You should sit down," Lucian said gently but seriously as he led her to the sofa in front of the fireplace. "There are things you need to know about Brandon and his plan, things you didn't hear last night." Serena sat and placed a hand over her belly in an unconscious protective gesture, as Lucian sat beside her and opened the file. "You've heard about the plot to kill you for the insurance money." Lucian began carefully, as if trying to soften the blow. "But there are details I didn't want to reveal in front of 800 people last night because I thought you should hear them privately." Serena nodded, even though her heart was pounding and she wasn't sure she could endure any more terrible truths. Lucian handed her the documents, and Serena began to read with trembling hands. They were emails between Brandon and Veronica from 6 months earlier. Detailed plans about how to kill her. They discussed hiring someone to cause a car accident after she gave birth, slowly poisoning her with sedatives to make it look like postpartum depression, suicide, pushing her down the stairs and blaming it on clumsiness during pregnancy. They even discussed what to do with the baby if necessary because a child without a mother would be a burden on their new life elsewhere. Serena dropped the file and began to shake uncontrollably as tears streamed down her face. Not only her but her daughter, the innocent baby not yet born, had been part of Brandon's murder plan. The man she had loved, trusted, sacrificed everything to be with, hadn't only wanted to kill her, but might have killed her child too if the baby became an obstacle. "He was going to kill my child," Serena whispered, her voice breaking like shattered glass as she wrapped her arms around her belly, as if to protect the child from danger that had already passed. "He was going to kill her. She's done nothing wrong. She's just a baby." Lucian didn't speak. He just pulled her into his arms and let her cry on his shoulder. Cries no longer gentle sobs, but the raw wail of a mother realizing her child had almost been killed. Serena cried for the child she nearly lost, for the innocence she had misplaced, for the 5 years she had lived beside a killer without knowing it. She cried for the 21-year-old girl who ran from the Moretti family out of fear of violence only to run into the arms of another kind of monster, a monster who didn't need guns to kill, but used sweet words and charming smiles to lure his prey. "He'll never touch you or the baby again," Lucian whispered into her hair as his hand stroked her back the way he used to when she was a child with nightmares. "He'll rot in prison for the rest of his life. I'll make sure of it. You're safe now, Piccola. The baby is safe now. No one can hurt either of you while I'm here." Serena didn't know how long she cried in Lucian's arms, but when she finally stopped, the sun was high and light slanted through the library windows. She felt exhausted, like she had run a marathon, but also lighter, as if a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Why?" Serena asked hoarsely. "Why did he do these things? I gave him everything. I loved him with my whole heart. Why wasn't that enough?" "Because he can't love," Lucian said with contempt for the man who had hurt her. "He can only use. You lacked nothing, Serena. You did nothing wrong. You were just unlucky enough to meet a psychopath who knew how to wear a normal mask. That isn't your fault." Serena looked up at Lucian's face and saw absolute sincerity in his gray eyes. No judgment, no blame, only pure love and pain that she had suffered so much. And in that moment she understood that true healing didn't come from revenge or justice, but from being unconditionally loved by someone who never gave up on her, no matter how hard she had pushed him away. The days that followed passed in a peace Serena hadn't known for 6 years. And she slowly grew used again to life in the Moretti mansion, to regular meals prepared by a private chef, to Dr. Vasquez's attentive care, to the sense of safety that came from knowing no one could touch her within these walls. But there was a conversation she knew she had to have with Lucian, a conversation about the night 6 years ago when she left and wrote that letter, and she had postponed it long enough. One evening, while Lucian was in his study reviewing papers, Serena knocked and stepped inside with her heart pounding. Lucian looked up, and a soft smile appeared when he saw her, but it faded when he noticed the seriousness on her face. "I need to talk to you," Serena said, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to stay calm. About the night I left. About the letter. About everything I did, and everything I never gave you the chance to explain. Lucian set down his pen and leaned back, his gray eyes on her with something she couldn't read. Perhaps expectation. Perhaps old pain. Perhaps both. You don't have to do this, Piccola, he said gently. The past is past. You're home now. That's what matters. But I need to do this, Serena insisted as she sat in the chair across from his desk. I need you to understand why I left, and I need to understand what really happened that night. I've lived with that question for 6 years, and I can't move on without an answer. Silence stretched between them, and Serena could hear the ticking of the old clock on the wall like a countdown to something important. Finally, Lucian sighed and nodded. All right, he said in a low, tired voice as if he'd carried this weight too long. Ask. I'll answer everything. Serena took a deep breath and began. I'm sorry, she said, and tears had already started even before she had said much. I'm sorry I left without giving you a chance to explain. I'm sorry for the cruel letter. I'm sorry I thought you were like the people who killed my parents. I'm sorry I didn't trust you after 12 years of you protecting me. Lucian closed his eyes for a second as if her words were touching an unhealed wound, and when he opened them, Serena saw a softness he rarely showed. You don't need to apologize for being afraid, he said slowly. You saw me kill a man in front of you. Anyone would be afraid. Your reaction was normal. But I was wrong to think you were a bad man, Serena said with regret. I was wrong to compare you to those who killed my parents. You saved me, raised me, loved me, and I repaid you by running as if you were a monster. Lucian stood and came around the desk and knelt in front of her so their eyes were level as he had done in the ballroom that night. There's something I never told you about that night, he said, his voice so serious it made Serena hold her breath. The man I killed was named Victor Salazar, and he wasn't only a traitor selling information to the Castellano family. Serena looked at him wide-eyed, her heart starting to race as she sensed what he was about to say would change everything. He was hired to kidnap you, Lucian said, and each word fell like a bomb in the silent room. The Castellano family knew you were my weakness, knew I'd do anything to protect you, and they planned to kidnap you to force me to give up territory. Victor Salazar had watched you for 2 weeks, recorded your schedule, found the moment you'd be alone. He planned to take you on your 21st birthday when you went to the kitchen for water. Serena felt as if someone had punched her in the chest, and she couldn't breathe for a few seconds. That night, she had gone to the kitchen for water and had passed Lucian's study by chance. What if she hadn't stopped when she heard the begging? What if she'd continued on as planned? He was going to kidnap me, Serena whispered, shaking. And you killed him to protect me. I killed him so you'd never have to know you were almost kidnapped in the very house you thought was safe, Lucian said with pain. I didn't want you to be afraid. I wanted you to keep living your normal life without worrying about my enemies. But you saw and you were afraid and you left, and I couldn't stop you because I couldn't tell you the truth while you were looking at me like I was a monster. Why didn't you tell me afterward? Serena asked through tears. Why didn't you find me and explain? Because you asked me not to find you, Lucian said, and his voice broke at the end as if 6 years of pain were spilling out. Because you said you wanted a life without me. Because I thought if you knew the truth you'd feel guilty and come back out of obligation. Not because you wanted to. I wanted you to return because you chose to, not because you felt you owed me. Serena couldn't hold back anymore, and she hugged Lucian, crying on his shoulder for the wasted years, for the misunderstanding that separated them, for the love he'd kept silent for so long just so she could be happy in the way she chose. I forgive you, Serena said, even though she knew he didn't need her forgiveness. And I hope you can forgive me. There's nothing to forgive, Piccola, Lucian whispered into her hair. You're home now. That's all I need. The weeks that followed in the Moretti mansion passed like a gentle dream Serena didn't want to wake from, and she slowly realized that her relationship with Lucian was changing in ways she hadn't expected. It was no longer the protection of a brother for a sister, no longer the care of a guardian for the one being guarded, but something deeper, more intense, something that made her heart race whenever Lucian entered the room and made her miss him whenever he was away, even for a few hours. Lucian made time for her every day, no matter how busy he was running the Moretti empire. He had breakfast with her in the small dining room instead of eating alone in his study, as he had done for 6 years. He walked with her in the garden in the afternoons when Dr. Vasquez advised gentle movement for the pregnancy. He read to her by the fireplace in the evenings, his low voice telling fairy tales the way he had when she was 9 and first brought from the blood-stained house. But now she heard them as a grown woman and realized that in every story the princess had black hair and brown eyes like hers. Lucian also began speaking to the baby in her belly every night before she slept, his hand resting lightly on her stomach as he whispered promises in Italian, the language of the Moretti family she had learned as a child. He promised to protect the little girl, to love her, to teach her how to tell the trustworthy from the wolves in sheep's clothing, to make sure she'd never have to endure what her mother had endured. And each time Serena heard those promises, her heart melted a little more, and the wall she had unconsciously built around her feelings crumbled piece by piece. One night when the baby kept her awake, Serena went down to the library and found Lucian still working, even though it was almost 2 a.m. He looked up when he heard her, and concern immediately crossed his face. "Are you all right?" he asked as he stood and walked toward her. "Is the baby bothering you?" "I'm fine," Serena said as she sat on the familiar sofa. "I just can't sleep." "Neither can I." Lucian sat beside her, and in the firelight his face looked softer, less frightening, more like the Lucian she remembered from childhood than the Mafia boss the city feared. "May I ask you something?" Lucian said after a moment of silence, his voice holding a hesitation she rarely heard. "Ask," Serena replied, turning to him with curiosity. "Have you ever thought of me as anything other than a brother?" Lucian asked, his gray eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "In all the 12 years you lived here, did you ever look at me and see a man instead of a protector?" Serena felt her heart skip and didn't know how to answer, because the truth was, she had tried not to think of Lucian that way for years, had tried to bury any feeling beyond family, because she believed he saw her as a sister, and she didn't want to damage that precious bond. "Why are you asking?" she asked instead. "Because I need you to know something," Lucian said as he took her hand, his rough palm enclosing hers with infinite gentleness. "I've loved you since the moment I carried you out of that dark closet and cried because you couldn't save the injured bird. I've loved you for 18 years, through every day you lived in this house, through every night I sat outside your door when you had nightmares, through every moment I watched you smile and wondered how a person could be that beautiful." Serena stopped breathing and tears welled up, though she didn't know why she was crying. "But I was young," she whispered, "and you were my protector. That's exactly why I never said anything," Lucian replied with pain as if tearing open an old wound. "I was 18 when I realized I loved you, and you were only 9. A broken child I vowed to protect forever. I was your guardian, your protector. I had no right to love you that way. I waited and hoped that when you grew older I might have a chance. But then you left and I thought I'd lost you forever." "You waited 18 years, Serena whispered. "You loved me in silence for 18 years. And I'll keep waiting if that's what you need," Lucian said as he lifted her chin so she looked into his eyes. "I ask nothing of you, Serena. I just want you to know the truth. You don't have to return my feelings. You don't have to love me. I only need you here, safe, happy. That's enough for me." But Serena knew that wasn't enough for her anymore after all she had been through and all he had done for her. She leaned forward and did what she had wanted to do for a long time but hadn't dared admit. She kissed him, softly and trembling as if it were her first kiss, even though it wasn't. And when Lucian kissed her back with all the tenderness and passion he had restrained for 18 years, Serena knew she had found real love, the kind she had searched for all her life but had been too blind to see had always been right beside her. 2 months after their first kiss in the library, on a spring night when the cherry blossoms in the gardens of the Moretti estate were just beginning to bloom, Serena woke at 3 a.m. with a sharp cramping pain in her lower abdomen, and she knew the moment had come. She reached out beside her and touched Lucian's shoulder, the man who had slept in the same room with her for the past 2 months, not because they had been intimate but because he couldn't bear the thought of her being alone when she could go into labor at any moment. "Lucian," Serena called, her voice trembling with pain and fear. "I think she's coming." Lucian woke instantly, as if he hadn't been asleep at all, and within seconds he was fully alert. Gray eyes fixed on her with a worry she had never seen on his usually controlled face. He lifted her gently as if she were the most precious thing in the world, and carried her to the car while Marcus Chen was already waiting by the door with the engine running, and Dr. Vasquez had been notified in advance to prepare a private delivery room at the hospital the Moretti family owned. The drive to the hospital took 20 minutes, but to Serena it felt like an eternity as the contractions grew stronger and closer together. She squeezed Lucian's hand so hard she was sure she'd leave bruises on his skin, but he didn't flinch. He only held her tighter and whispered soothing words in Italian, words she didn't fully understand but whose rhythm calmed her. "You can do this, Piccola," Lucian repeated like a mantra. "You're the strongest woman I know. You'll get through this." When they arrived at the hospital, Serena was taken into the delivery room immediately, and Dr. Vasquez was waiting with the best medical team money could buy. Lucian didn't leave her side for a second. He stood beside the bed and let her crush his hand with every contraction, wiped the sweat from her forehead, gave her water when she was thirsty, and kept telling her she was doing beautifully even as he saw the pain tearing through her. Labor lasted 14 hours, and they were the longest 14 hours of both Serena's and Lucian's lives. There were moments when Serena thought she couldn't go on, that the pain was unbearable, that she wouldn't make it, but then she looked into Lucian's gray eyes and saw absolute faith in her, and she found the strength to continue. At 5:17 in the afternoon, after one final push in which Serena poured every last bit of strength from her exhausted body, the cry of a newborn filled the room, and Serena heard Dr. Vasquez say with emotion that it was a girl, healthy and perfect. The baby was placed on Serena's chest, and she looked down at the tiny red face, crying with eyes tightly shut and little fingers clenched into fists, and she cried with happiness, with relief, with a fierce breath stealing love for this small being she had just met. "My daughter," Serena whispered as her fingers gently touched the baby's cheek. "My daughter is here." Serena looked up at Lucian and saw something she had never seen before. The most ruthless mafia boss in the Midwest was crying, silent tears running down his face as he looked at her and the baby, with what she could only describe as pure awe. "She's beautiful," Lucian said hoarsely. "She's beautiful like her mother. Do you want to hold her?" Serena asked and gently passed the baby to him. He took the child with the care one gives an irreplaceable treasure, and when the baby settled into his strong arms, she stopped crying and opened her eyes for the first time, looking up at the man holding her with clear blue eyes. "Hello, Isabella Rose," Lucian whispered in a voice only Serena and now Isabella would ever hear. "Welcome to the world. I'm Lucian, and I promise I'll protect you and your mother with my life until my final breath." Serena watched the man she loved holding her daughter, and she knew that even though Isabella wasn't Lucian's blood, he would love her as if she were. She knew her daughter would grow up surrounded by love, protected by strength, guided by wisdom. She knew Isabella would never have to endure what she had endured, never doubt her worth, never suffer the cruelty of those who wear love as a disguise. And when Lucian sat beside her bed with Isabella still in his arms and bent to kiss Serena's forehead with all the tenderness his hardened heart could hold, Serena realized that this was her true family, not bound by paper or blood, but by love, sacrifice, and promises kept through time. 1 year after Isabella Rose was born, the Moretti estate was adorned with thousands of white roses and silver ribbons for a wedding the entire city of Chicago whispered about. It wasn't a lavish celebration with hundreds of guests as people might expect from the head of the Moretti Empire, but an intimate ceremony in the garden behind the estate with only those closest to them witnessing the moment Lucian Moretti officially became the husband of Serena Blackwood. Serena stood before Lucian in a simple yet elegant white gown, holding a bouquet of white roses, tears of happiness in her eyes as she looked at the man who had waited for her for 18 years, the man who had loved her in silence and protected her from the shadows without ever asking for anything in return. Marcus Chen stood beside Lucian as best man, and Dr. Vasquez sat in the front row with Isabella in her arms, the 1-year-old asleep, and unaware that today her mother was finally gaining a complete family. When Lucian slipped the ring onto Serena's finger and vowed to love and protect her until death parted them, Serena knew these weren't empty words like those Brandon had once spoken, but promises forged from 18 years of waiting and 6 years of pain. And when she said yes, and Lucian bent to kiss her before those who loved them, Serena felt as though every broken piece of her life had finally been assembled into something whole. That evening, after the guests had gone and Isabella had been placed in her crib in the nursery decorated with glowing stars on the ceiling, Serena stood by the bedroom window, looking out over the garden where she had become Mrs. Moretti only hours earlier. Lucian came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder as they gazed at the star-filled sky. "What are you thinking about?" Lucian asked softly. "I'm thinking about the journey that brought me here," Serena replied as she turned within his arms to look into the gray eyes she loved. "I lost my parents when I was 9. You and your father saved me from hell. I grew up in love but was too blind to see its value. I ran away in fear and fell into the hands of a man who wanted to kill me. And in the end I came home, back to you, and found a happiness I never thought I deserved." "You deserve every good thing, Piccola," Lucian said as he kissed her forehead with all the tenderness his hardened heart held for her. "You always have. You just needed time to realize it." Serena smiled because she knew he was right. She had spent too many years believing she wasn't enough, that she was a burden, that she didn't deserve love. But now she knew those were lies Brandon had planted to control her. The truth was she deserved to be loved, to be happy, to be protected, and she had found all of that in the arms of the man holding her now. Somewhere in a federal prison, Brandon Cole was serving a 25-year sentence and would never be able to touch her or her daughter again. Veronica Lane was serving 10 years, and her reputation was utterly destroyed. Justice had been done not through violence or revenge, but through truth and law. And Serena, The woman who once stood trembling in a ballroom with ice water on her face and humiliation burning in her heart, now stood in her husband's estate with a wedding ring on her hand and her daughter sleeping in the next room. Sometimes the greatest love isn't loud or grand but patient in the shadows, protecting without demanding, sacrificing without seeking recognition. Sometimes the one worthy of our heart isn't the one who speaks the sweetest words but the one who stands with us when everything falls apart. Sometimes home isn't where we run to but where we stop running. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most dangerous devil is also the gentlest angel, if you're the one he chooses to love. Thank you for following this story from beginning to end. This is a story about love, forgiveness, and a woman's journey home after losing everything and finding more than she ever dreamed of. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our daily videos. Don't forget to like and share this video with those you love so they too can hear meaningful stories like this. We'd love to know how you feel about Serena and Lucian's story. Have you ever been loved in silence by someone who waited for you without conditions? Have you ever had to go through toxic relationships before finding the one who truly deserved you? Leave a comment below and share what's in your heart because we always listen and value every one of your voices. Finally, we wish everyone watching good health, a joyful life full of love, peace, and happiness every day. Goodbye and see you in the next video.